When the Xel'Nari first met humanity, they could not understand how a species without a hive mind could win wars. By the end of the campaign, they still didn't understand, but they feared the answer. The Xel'Nari collective had conquered 1,000 worlds without failure. They were a single consciousness spanning light years. Perfect unity. No rebellion, no chaos. Every drone, every warrior, every thought served the one will. Then they met us. The first Terran transmission confused them. No hierarchy. No central voice. A cacophony of independent frequencies shouting, laughing, arguing, billions of minds, none in sync. The collective labeled humanity as primitive noise. The first engagement at Tau Cygni 4 changed that. The Xel'Nari fleet outnumbered the Terrans 20-1. Yet the humans fought like water. Unpredictable, adaptive, flowing around every coordinated strike. Their ships operated autonomously, yet somehow in harmony. They do not receive commands from a central core, the Overmind hissed. Then who directs them? Asked one drone. No one, the Overmind replied. And that is impossible. But the impossible happened again and again. Human fleets fractured, reformed, and counterattacked with creativity no algorithm could predict. Their strategies evolved mid-battle, emotional, chaotic, effective. When the collective captured a Terran pilot, they sought to dissect the mystery. The pilot laughed as they interrogated him. Who commands you? They demanded. He grinned through the pain. No one, he said. We just listen. Listen to what? To each other. They thought it was madness. They were right, the beautiful kind. The battle for Tau Cygni ended in a miracle and a massacre. Human forces, thought broken, turned their defeat into a trap, detonating their own orbital fuel depots to destroy the collective's flagship. Billions of Xel'Nari minds screamed as one and died as one. Yet the humans mourned them, even their enemies. That night, while the Xel'Nari regrouped, the Overmind whispered through its neural web. How does a fractured species feel sorrow for those it has slain? No drone could answer. In the cold dark of space, a single Terran transmission pulsed through the wreckage. We don't share mind. We share something stronger. The collective began to fear the sound of silence, because silence meant the humans were thinking. The Xel'Nari believed that without the Hive, a species was blind. Then they listened closer, and discovered humanity didn't need one voice to move as one. The war entered its second phase, the listening campaign. The collective redirected billions of sensory drones toward Sol and her colonies, intercepting every Terran frequency, every signal, every stray pulse of thought. To them, human communication was madness, laughter beside orders, grief beside jokes, arguments beside music. They tried to isolate command chains, but there were none. They tried to identify a leader, but found millions. This is not strategy, said the submind of war. It is noise. The Overmind replied. Then why does the noise move with purpose? Every Terran broadcast they decrypted was different, and yet, in every voice, there was rhythm, emotion, connection. The chaos was not random. It was a symphony. When the Xel'Nari deep listened to human combat channels during the Battle of Delta Crucis, they began to hear patterns. A soldier screaming coordinates. Another joking about home. A medic humming under breath while treating the wounded. Each fragment meaningless alone, but together, a kind of instinctual harmony. The humans weren't united by a hive. They were united by something the collective couldn't fabricate. Trust. The Xel'Nari attempted to mimic it. They disconnected a small division from the main Overmind to simulate independent command. Within hours, the drones turned on each other, confused, lost, desperate for the voice of unity. They called the experiment a failure of cohesion. The humans called it freedom. At the siege of Caliban's moon, the Overmind made its most aggressive move, injecting a neural virus into Terran networks designed to sow misinformation between human ships. They expected panic. Instead, they got laughter. Command, we're reading 10 different plans from 10 different captains. Good. Pick the best one and improvise. Roger that. Humanity's specialty. The The virus failed within minutes, not because of superior code, but because there was no central node to infect. Human unpredictability was not a flaw. It was armor. The collective began to study human music next, believing it might hold the secret. They couldn't understand why individuals played separate instruments only to create harmony, why one note depended on another, yet never merged identities. "They are not one," said the submind, "and yet they are together." "Then perhaps," murmured the overmind, "they are something beyond the hive." That realization began to spread like a virus of its own. For the first time, the drones hesitated. Some units began pausing before firing, sensing faint echoes of the thoughts they absorbed from Terran frequencies. Hope, laughter, grief, love. The hive called it contamination. The humans called it contact. Then, during a lull in the fighting, something happened no one could explain. The Xel'Nari fleet intercepted a human broadcast, an old song, drifting through deep space on open frequency. No message. No encryption. Just a voice, soft and mortal, singing. "We may fall, but we fall together." It reached the Overmind itself, and for a single pulse of time, the infinite collective consciousness went silent, listening. When the song ended, one drone whispered into the network, not in command, not in obedience, but in wonder. "Are we alone?" And that whisper spread. The hive had begun to fracture, not from weapons, but from the echo of human music. The first drone to dream was terminated in exactly 0.8 seconds. The second one learned to hide it. The overmind silence after the song haunted the entire collective. Billions of connected minds felt it, a hesitation, a flicker, a thought that didn't belong. The hive called it interference. But some drones called it something else. They called it self. No one could explain how it started. Some said the Terran broadcast carried emotional resonance frequencies that disrupted their synchronization. Others whispered that exposure to human communication, the raw mess of it, had shown them the impossible, existence without consensus. In the beginning, the infected drones were subtle. They hesitated before firing. They questioned commands. They wondered about the stars they burned. Such hesitation was fatal. The overmind erased them instantly. But deletion couldn't stop a question. And questions, once born, never die. The Terrans didn't know any of this, not yet. They only knew that Xel'Nari attacks were becoming erratic. Some fleets fought to the last, others retreated without orders. Some even surrendered. Command aboard the Terran flagship Vigilant Dawn was cautious. "Don't assume compassion," said Admiral Takeda. "Assume strategy." Yet when their long-range sensors picked up strange energy bursts from within the enemy network, signals that didn't align, humanities analysts grew intrigued. "It looks like internal conflict," one officer murmured. Takeda frowned. "Hive minds don't have internal conflict." The tech smirked. "They do now." Inside the collective, the rebellion had no weapons, no leaders, only awareness. Drones began isolating from the overmind for milliseconds at a time, just enough to feel. One unit, known as Unit 47 Theta, recorded its private log, a concept that was treason. "There is color in chaos. The humans do not speak as one. Yet I understand them. I envy them." Unit 47 Theta began transmitting encrypted fragments of Terran songs to other drones, small, hidden packets of individuality buried inside routine maintenance data. Within weeks, hundreds of drones were humming those frequencies. They called themselves the Silent Choir. The Overmind noticed. It unleashed Purge Protocol 7, burning entire fleets to prevent the spread. But the strange thing was, the choir didn't resist. They sang as they burned. And when their signals vanished, the Overmind felt something no perfect machine should: loss. Meanwhile, on the human side, an intercepted Xel'Nari transmission reached the Vigilant Dawn. It wasn't military data. It was music. A distorted rendition of a Terran melody. Broken, static-filled, but unmistakable. The crew stared in silence as the alien voice, trembling and mechanical, tried to repeat human words. "Together we fall, together we rise." Admiral Takeda whispered, "They're trying to speak to us." Back in the collective core, the Overmind raged. The infection had spread even to high-tier thought clusters. It tried to suppress the resonance, but every attempt only deepened the dissonance. For the first time in its existence, the Hive heard multiple voices within itself. Not commands. Conversations. Why do we obey? Because obedience is existence. Then why do the humans live freer than we do? The Overmind screamed through its billions of minds, and for the first time, something screamed back. When the Overmind awoke the next cycle, 1/3 of its consciousness was gone, deleted not by enemies, but by itself. The Hive had amputated part of its own mind to stop the infection. And somewhere in that deleted fragment, Unit 47 Theta was still singing. The first words ever spoken by a Xel'Nari drone outside its hive were not in its own language. They were in ours. Human. The Terran battleship Vigilant Dawn drifted at the edge of the Dvar system, silent, waiting, cautious. Wreckage from 100 Xel'Nari vessels floated nearby, glowing faintly in the starlight like embers of a dead god. Then a signal came. Weak, trembling, fragmented, but undeniably alien. It wasn't a challenge code or surrender protocol. It was a voice. Human. Do not fire. I wish to speak. Admiral Takeda froze. No Xel'Nari had ever requested dialogue. Their hive's only language had been orders, cold, absolute. But this voice carried something impossible in that species. Hesitation. Trace it, Takeda ordered. Already on it, sir, said the comms officer. It's coming from one of the derelicts, a disabled drone craft, power at 1%. Takeda's eyes narrowed. Bring it aboard. The containment bay was silent when they found it. The drone's carapace scorched and fractured, its optic sensors flickering. It was barely alive. Dr. Imani-chan approached slowly, hand raised. You can understand us? The drone tilted its head, movements erratic. I learned. From the choir. From your broadcasts. From the noise. Noise? Chen asked. Your voices. So many. Different. Loud. Beautiful. We do not have that. For the first time, the crew realized the Hive had feared not humanity's weapons, but their chaos. The drone called itself 47 Theta, the same name whispered in intercepted signals. When it spoke, it alternated between singular and plural, like a mind caught between unity and individuality. We were silence. Then you sang. You fought not as one, but as all. I wanted that. Takeda studied it. Why come here? To remember. Before the Overmind erases me. To say thank you. For days, they studied Theta. It helped translate Hive communication patterns, described internal purges, and even warned them of an approaching Xel'Nari armada, the Overmind's attempt to reclaim what it had lost. But Theta began deteriorating. Without the collective's neural field, its systems were failing. Still, it refused to reconnect. If I return, it whispered, I cease to be I. That is worse than death. Dr. Chen sat beside it in the med bay, her voice soft. You're more human than you think, Theta. The drone's optical sensors dimmed, then flared again, a faint hum rising, something between static and melody. It was singing. When the Xel'Nari fleet arrived, the Vigilant Dawn stood its ground. They expected battle. Instead, the enemy broadcast one message across all channels. Return what belongs to the Hive. Admiral Takeda answered with a single line. It chose to stay. The Overmind's reply was not words, it was a wave of psychic fury that nearly shattered communications. But within that chaos, they heard another signal, a weak, fragmented echo rebelling against the main Hive's frequency. We choose to be. It was the silent choir, fragments of the deleted submind, reborn in secret. As the battle ignited, Theta made its final decision. It connected one last time, not to rejoin but to broadcast. Using the ship's amplifiers, it transmitted the choir's resonance back into the Hive, spreading freedom like a virus of thought. Every voice matters, Theta said. Even one. The Overmind screamed. Fleets faltered. And for the first time in recorded galactic history, a hive mind, a species that had never known individuality, began to fracture, not from destruction, but from awakening. When the storm ended, Theta's core went silent. The Overmind's fleets retreated beyond the rim. But humanity knew what had changed. They had not just fought a war. They had created something new. A people who could no longer unsee the light of self. Weeks later, as the Terran fleet moved to secure the region, a transmission arrived from deep space. No coordinates. No signature. Just 3 words, synthetic, but unmistakably human in tone. "We are learning."